Hey everyone, welcome back to Rally Caps. It's a podcast for artists, entrepreneurs, and everybody in between. I'm Steven.
And I'm Eric.
And today's episode is similar to an episode we did kind of recently about the Canon C400, little breaking news style kind of thing. They were announced last week, Wednesday, the 17th of July, I believe. We're going to get into the R5 Mark II and the R1, two
Cameras.
kind of new cameras from Canon. We're going to share all of our thoughts on that, discuss where we currently feel about them, how they might
Be a disappointment.
change the industry from top to bottom. No, definitely not. We just want to unpack some of that a little bit and then maybe talk about future camera decisions. Before we go into that, I do want to shout out the Rally Caps audience because we have been making a much more concentrated effort trying to get more subscribers, more reviews of the show on Apple and Spotify. And y'all have really been showing up lately. Really appreciate it. We've noticed a substantial uptick in reviews on Spotify, more engagement on the YouTube videos, more people subscribing to the channel. And I just want to take a second to thank all of you for doing that. Really appreciate your time, your effort in doing those things. Really means a lot to us. So thank you for doing that. And if you haven't already, little PSA, we would love for you to jump on board, get on the team, leave a review on Spotify, and get on board on the channel for Rally Caps on YouTube. Just trying to grow the team and grow the show more and more each day. So thanks for being here. And let's get into the conversation on Canon in general, but specifically on the R5 Mark II and the R1. Let's start with the R5 Mark II.
Good.
Because it's good?
Yeah.
Great, cool. How do you feel about the R1? Yeah, that's all we need to say.
What's interesting about this conversation is you will have so much more insight on the photo side of these releases. I don't pay attention to the photo side on any release anymore. Doesn't feel like it matters to me at this point. Anything after the R5, I was like, cool, could chill with this camera indefinitely.
Yeah. I think that's the general sentiment around digital cameras in general. Like we've kind of hit a plateau.
Yeah. And so I think that's the overarching conversation in this. The overarching theme of this conversation is, and we've said it in previous gear episodes.
Yes.
We're plateauing hard on stuff. So
especially on the stills front.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much better, or like you can't do any more numbers really. So since there's no more numbers, you just have to start saying things like better of the thing that's already there and better of the other thing that's already there. And 0.2 more pixels here.
Yep. It feels like an Apple keynote, honestly, where everything is just flashy numbers and it's 40% better than previous years kind of thing. They're very incremental upgrades that in the grand scheme of things don't, I mean, they kind of make a difference, but
because some of those Apple keynotes, you're like, this new MacBook Pro and the 40% betterness of it
Yes. But I'm saying in like, what does it actually mean at the end of the day? Like you as a viewer of that keynote, you're like,
I have
cool.
No clue.
I don't know. Oh,
Need to see it work.
1,000% more neural processing. I don't know what that means. Like what? I didn't know there were neurons in my computer. Okay. Awesome. Love that. How does it? It's like it's a lost in translation thing. How do these numbers actually translate to my life, and what is it doing to make it better? And it feels very similar here with Canon with the release of these two cameras. One of them being their flagship camera for the RF mount, and I'm just going to start by saying both of them feel very lackluster, and both of them feel half baked, and also behind by 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
R5 Mark II. Kind of looks like an R5 Mark 1.5, to be honest.
Yeah.
Everything's faster. That's cool. On a stills front, everything's faster. Autofocus.
Does it need to be faster?
I don't know. R5 seemed already
pretty fast.
Smarter than me. I don't know.
That one has lots of neurons.
Lots of neurons in that camera, dude. Firing like crazy. The gray matter, out of control. I don't know. It just felt like kind of like that's cool. I'm glad things are like improving, but at the same time, what really needs to improve? Like, what are people not getting out of the R5 currently that this will give them on a stills front, specifically?
It's a release where if you already have an R5 or R5C, you can't justify buying an R5 Mark II.
Yep.
But if you're still on a 6D or a 5D Mark IV, on the photo side,
Yeah.
and you're dabbling in video and hybrid shooter, you want to get better at video,
Yeah.
R5 Mark II is probably a great choice.
Yeah.
The extra couple $100 you're going to spend on that, or it may, you know, $1,000 or whatever with gadgets and stuff you add onto it.
Yep.
Now with C-Log 2
Yeah.
in the camera.
On the video front, it finally has C-Log 2 officially. I would say that's the biggest upgrade.
It feels like they're finally no longer crippling this level of camera. They're like, okay, just here's everything now.
Yeah. But
Really wish the R5, the original R5 had C-Log 2,
Yeah.
or even the R5C had C-Log 2.
being
even
in the
though
cinema line, it felt like it should have.
We
but
had that issue with the C-Log 3 being basically the C-Log 2 curve and the C-Log 3 not matching in the R5C and the R5.
yeah, it was inconsistent between all of those cameras, which was frustrating as well.
Which we talked about on another episode.
I think it was the C400 episode, maybe.
Probably. But honestly, looking through the spec sheet of what's changed on the video front, that's essentially it. It does 8K 60. We said before we started rolling here, no one's using 8K 60. Sure, you might use it. Even so many filmmakers hate 60 as a frame rate because they don't think it's good enough slow motion. People really want to be able to dial in like 48 on a cinema camera or other.
I think that's that's what feels weird is who is buying this camera in order to use 8K 60 raw?
No one.
Yeah, I mean that it just feels very press oriented. Like, oh, this is a cool number.
New spec.
It's one of those, it's a keynote thing to flex. In reality, I don't think it makes much of a difference for the people actually needing this camera. It's technically a different sensor. It's faster in that sense. The autofocus is faster. I think it has some kind of AI intelligent autofocus in that now. You can technically control the autofocus with the movement of your eye, which is cool, but also I think for a lot of people probably isn't reliable enough yet that it would deter them from using either the touchpad or the joystick. Also, it's so smart and sticky as is. Like I could just leave it on, like just detect people in servo when I had my R5 and it was fine all the time. Like I never missed when I was using that. I think the EVF is the same resolution as before. The screen on the back is the same frame rates, like frames per second. A bit, actually, no, I'm sorry. It's
much more.
30 FPS
versus 20.
So
I don't need 30. It feels pretty classic, like don't hate the player, hate the game kind of launch, where you're like, did you need to launch something? Definitely not.
No.
Do your shareholders need you to launch something? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so they did. And it's at a base level $400 more expensive than the R5 when the R5 released 4 years ago.
Well,
4 years ago?
That makes sense with inflation, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's on par with inflation, if not less, actually. Unfortunately, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. I have a hard time believing that, though, with other camera launches that have happened, and those prices generally either been the same. Yeah. Some have stayed either the same or maybe a little more expensive in the case of, I think of the classic example being the X100 series from Fuji. They did increase the price of the X106 by $200, which is hilarious to me because they couldn't even keep up with production of the previous generation of that camera.
They still haven't released that camera to the public.
I don't think anyone has one.
Yeah.
Or if they do, it's very few people. The X100V is still going on websites for $2,000.
Chris Howe made a really funny reel yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Did you see it?
No.
He was just like, pre-ordered my X106 V6. What? No, 6. X106 in February, and it's currently July. And it was him photographing his car with it was nothing in his hands. He was just changing the settings.
That's awesome.
And they're like, wow, this is straight out of camera.
That's so cool.
What presets did you use? And he's like, I love you, Fuji. I promise.
I just want my camera, please.
Yeah.
Could you ship it? It's almost 6 months later. That's awesome. So all in all, it seems like video is the most exciting thing with C-Log 2 being added to R5 Mark II. It's got a tally light on the front of it now, too. Yeah. So it does seem in that sense like much more oriented towards filmmakers.
So it is that one where we were discussing this in a recent episode, like what is going to be your best hybrid camera if you're going to choose one camera.
Yeah.
The R5 Mark II does feel like that now. Now that it has C-Log 2, like properly has C-Log 2, has all the same chops and better on the photo side, has all the same chops and better on the video side, the R5 didn't have. Because the only thing we were frustrated with on the R5 video side is not having C-Log 2 and overheating. So if you don't have overheating, which we don't know yet.
You could get a sick $400 cooling grip, though. That'd be awesome. I love that.
Okay, all jokes aside, though.
That's a pretty good joke, though,
It is a
because
good
that's
joke.
hilarious that they have to make that as an accessory.
I know. So it almost proves the point that it will.
If you are making it, it kind of,
But if you're willing to invest that little extra piece as well to then have essentially the foolproof hybrid camera. Is it worth it? Maybe.
It might be. Not disagreeing at all. I do think they have made it much better on a hybrid front. I think there is definitely validity there with the video bump.
Yeah. It almost begs like that there should be an R5C Mark II with an option to have the fan with C-Log 2.
It kind of feels like they just learned from the R5 launch. R5C was a stopgap, and now they have the R5 Mark II with that whole grip accessory. So that's almost like the fans from the R5C, but you could take it off if you want to.
But you have full frame log 2.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Pretty fantastic.
It is. You've also had full frame S-Log 3 on the Sony A7R5 for the last 2 years that the camera has been out with a 61 megapixel sensor and the same amount of 8K and really high resolution viewfinder, higher resolution actually.
What's low light like in that camera at 61 megapixels?
For video or photo?
Both.
I have no idea, but Benj certainly seems to love it. It's his favorite hybrid camera for weddings, at least. So it's one of those moments finally where I'm like, okay, this does feel like it is legitimately like 2 years late. Where it's like cameras like with these specs and these types of capabilities have been around for a while. And now that Canon, being one of the biggest players in the game, are doing it too, that is a good sign. Weirdly, another parallel with Apple. Apple adopts something, it suddenly becomes a more normal thing, a standard. Even though Android users have been using that same thing for 5-10 years previously. And they're like, oh, Apple, they finally, USB-C in a phone. Who'd have thought? And that's been a common thing for so long. It just feels like one of those moments of, okay, I can see why people would complain about those things for so long to Canon, where it's like, why? Well, you've been dragging your feet. Other cameras are just kind of coming out ahead and having all of these feature sets available to people at similar or lower prices. So, it's the R5 Mark II in particular feels like just a very, very minor bump date. Yeah. I was kind of hoping for more. I also wasn't expecting it to come out when it did. I thought that keynote that Canon did was just going to be the R1. Because I think the R5, how old is the R5 at this point? I think it's
got to be at least 4 years.
5 release date.
Yeah.
It was
2020.
Yeah, July 9th, 2020. Yeah. I don't know. Position it this way. I'm not shooting Canon anymore, but when you see the R5 Mark II, are you like, I need to get this, or could you care less?
I don't care.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I already have an R5.
Yeah.
If I was in a different point in my career, if I was in 2018 and I was in that situation where I was hybrid shooting the 1DX2 as my B photo cam and my A video camera, I would want the R5 Mark II in my lineup to shoot hybrid.
Yeah.
I would want that as a respectable A cam in the video front. But then, it just then begs the question, because the battery life was great on the 1DX2 with the big chunky battery. And I know they sell the accessory with the double battery slot for the R5 II, but then you don't have the cooling, I assume.
Probably not. Yeah, I don't know if there's any battery capability in the cooling. Let me find out.
Yeah, because there's definitely questions you have there. The whole overheating thing is such a problem when it comes to shooting long form events like a wedding or commercial work, or if you're doing live event sort of stuff.
The cooling grip does accept 2 LPE6 batteries.
Okay.
E6P, which I think is the new battery that they buy. And I think those grips are not compatible with any of the LPE6s before.
Nice.
But hopefully them changing the architecture of the LPU6 battery, which they've kept around for like 20 years now, does help with battery consumption on the R5 Mark II and I was going to say the R1, but it doesn't even accept that battery. It has its own proprietary chunky battery.
Like the 1DX2, 3.
Yeah. So it's a $400 grip. It does the fans, and it has spots for 2 batteries.
And again, to the like all jokes aside point is that you need to make sacrifices in a body that doesn't have a fan and isn't built like a cinema camera to do the video things it does. Without overheating. Are you going to dunk on that with Sony stuff?
No, I don't need to. I don't need to be a super downer.
But like to have those capabilities, then it's, you're essentially playing that hybrid game of, okay, then I need to kind of build it out to be this pseudo cinema camera, which then the cooling grip is just a part of that build out. So then you have to go, oh, am I going to add the monitor? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do a shotgun mic? The
whole thing.
And then I need a cage. And we talked about that recently where that life is frustrating because every weekend, if you're shooting photo and video back and forth, you're having to break down and build up it between a photo camera and a video camera, or a photo camera and a pseudo cinema camera.
And you'd hate for a piece to get lost in translation because there are so many pieces. And that happens.
And so you need to be meticulously organized about that. But if you're just on a road trip and you want to do photo and have really, really good cinematic, high quality video, you could just pare it down, and then it is a phenomenal camera in that sense.
100%. I think for people who love Canon, R5 Mark II seems like the best iteration of any stills video combo camera that they've ever made, which is awesome. I just feel down on it because
it's too late.
It's too late. And
vlogging
I think
is over.
Yeah, exactly. And I part of me, for listeners of the show, I switched my professional digital system from Canon to Sony about 2 months ago. Almost exactly 2 months ago. I still have a couple Canon cameras for sentimentality, but as far as working environments are concerned, it's Sony for me now. And I think almost part of me was waiting to hear this keynote and being like, oh, did I make a mistake? Like maybe they'll surprise me kind of thing. And like, maybe we'll entertain going back. And then as soon as I saw everything, it just confirmed that it was the right decision for me, at least to switch. 'Cause Canon was like, my ride or die for 10 years. Like I want to see them succeed, but it's hard to root for them when this is what they're releasing in 2024. And it just seems kind of like a meh stopgap kind of thing. So that is the R5 Mark II. The R1 is a brand new camera, no predecessor. R3 was kind of like its like little weird little brother kind of thing that they had. I think they released that about 1.5 years ago.
So that camera's just like, no one's going to care about that thing now.
I don't see why they would, because the R1 is coming in as like the flagship camera, sitting at a price of $6,300 US. It's definitely in that 1DX range, like you were talking about with the 1DX Mark II. This is like the 1DX, but for the RF mount in their mirrorless line of cameras. Again, looks really cool. I'm sure it's an excellent camera because everyone's making great cameras these days. But it also doesn't look any different than the A9 Mark III from Sony. As far as like tit for tat, like specs are concerned, like across the board, they're basically around the same. So that begs the question, well, like, do you want a camera this large, this chunky? The A9 Mark III succeeds in all those categories, but in a much smaller form factor. So if travel is something that you do often as a photographer or filmmaker, probably go for the thing that isn't enormous. I mean, this camera is like huge. Seeing it side by side with the R5 Mark II, it's like almost double the height of it. It's crazy.
But still smaller than the 1DX Mark II and Mark III.
I'm actually not sure if it is.
Oh boy.
It is from the photos I've seen. I can't say that for certain, but the photos I've seen, it looks
smaller.
Does it?
Yeah.
Do you have yours over there? I think it is over there.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually, I kind of want to look at the sizes, if they have the physical dimensions in here at all. It was larger than I was expecting it to be, because it's bigger than the R3.
Even in this photo relative to the size of the lens, the top of the 1DX2 is much taller.
Right, because of the prism in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the
and it
mirrorless
feels like
savings.
it's more rounded on the on every edge.
Right.
But probably pretty comparable.
It's
looking at it.
I think it's pretty close.
Like the bottom.
1DX.
I'm just looking at this image.
2 dimensions.
Like
yeah.
look at how it sits underneath the
Right.
lens. Like it seems smaller on the bottom. The head up top is definitely smaller.
The other tricky thing is the lenses have gotten
bigger.
larger. So perceptually, I actually think
It might be exactly the same.
I think it's exactly the same. Wait, 6.2 by 6.6 by 3.3. I'll definitely remember all those numbers when I flip back between
This
the
is
million
taller than
tabs that I have.
6.5 inches.
6.2, 5.9, 3.4. Okay, so it is slightly shorter.
Okay.
Yes, it is slightly shorter. Okay.
But Steven, who is this camera for?
Olympic photographers and basically
Who don't shoot video.
Yeah.
It's always so shocking to me that even back in the day, the 1DX series, not even the 1DX Mark II. I mean, like the original, just 1DX. I think it was the original. Still had crazy video specs, and it was so confusing as to why.
To have that, yeah. I mean, this is like
I feel like it was Canon's first SLR that had 4K video.
Maybe
That or the 5D.
they did technically. You remember the 1DC?
The 1DC.
They did make the 1DC, which was their very first SLR with a DSLR with 4K inside of it. That camera retailed for like $15,000 or something. It was
crazy.
absurdly priced, but it was the very first one in that form factor.
Did it have log? It probably had log.
Maybe. Yeah.
Like C log.
And you can get a beautiful image out of that camera too.
Crazy.
It's really funny to look at all this because it is so clearly oriented for literally the photographers at the Olympics in Paris currently.
Yeah, like the photos of it are on a track.
Yeah.
Or like on rubber tennis court.
And all the leaked photos of this camera too were at events. Like all the Canon, explorers of light and the ambassadors that they have in their programs, they've been field testing this thing for a while, and it's all been in the context of really fast movement and the need to track people, like specific people, in a much larger group of people.
Right, because it says that there is the cross-type autofocus, new focusing technology, select subjects according to movement and other factors, so you always get a great action shot.
Yep.
That's what it says. Action priority enables the camera to track specific people, balls, movement, and eye control autofocus, ensuring the capture of the perfect action shot, even in fast-paced scenes. So I'm assuming it like follows people behind other bodies and other things.
Which, for the right photographer, I'm sure that is invaluable.
Right.
I'm sure that's
really
great.
a really good version of that.
Yeah. To have that, I'm sure is amazing.
But then it also has the advanced eye control autofocus.
Yep.
For even faster positioning of your active AF area, the R1 adds Canon's eye control autofocus, even more advanced than the eye control that was in the R3.
Yep.
Once you calibrate the viewfinder to your eye, just look where you want to focus, and the autofocus area will move there when you press the autofocus activation button.
Which is very sick for anyone who doesn't wear glasses.
Oh.
Yeah, because I've heard that glasses screw that up pretty royally.
Wait, this new system is even robust enough to work when the user is wearing glasses.
We'll see.
Yeah, again, it's just all these factors where you're like, I don't know.
I don't know. And then also, when you think about it more, you're like, do I even want that? Do I want my eye to be the thing controlling it?
Right.
I don't even know.
It almost feels like these versions of cameras with a half-baked technology like that, you almost want to wait until it's fully good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's just totally revolutionary.
Yeah.
Or whatever subject. I feel like there's even problems with that because like my ADHD brain is like zooming around the EVF,
that's where my
and then
brain
I'm
goes to.
screwing up the autofocus.
That's why I'd be curious to like test it and see how it responds and how it tracks your eye in that moment. Because I feel the same way. Like I like to see what's going on in the frame and keep my autofocus point in one place. Like I don't even, it feels like it could be cool, but also maybe gimmicky.
Yeah.
I just can't tell. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is. And
Again, these are just the things where I'm like, do we need that?
yeah, I don't.
I don't think we need that.
No, I feel like more than anything, and this is probably why I'm like especially like meh about this update and this announcement, is that photographically our needs have changed considerably over the years. And these types of specs just do not appeal to us.
Right.
We just don't need them.
Right.
The R5 as is more than enough camera, I think, for so many people. If anything, use this time to go scoop a really cheap R5 right now, because that camera is amazing. And if you are primarily a stills
R6.
photographer, or R6 too, if you're primarily stills, like absolutely go for it. It's just, I think you'd actually get more value out of that, getting one pre-owned for like 2,000, 2,500, somewhere in that range, instead of dropping 4,300 plus with tax on top of that for a brand new one.
But a thought I had earlier was, if the C400 is what it is marked up to be, having that camera and then a B camera in the R5 Mark II could be incredibly powerful.
Definitely.
C-Log 2 capabilities, if
Yeah.
they're going to look like a very similar image.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And then you still have a stills camera on set.
Yeah, and you're not
if
having
you
to buy
need
two C400s.
Which, yeah.
So you have a dedicated cinema camera, you have a hybrid camera. I think ideally, if all of these ended up being as good as they are on paper,
Right.
my ideal lineup would then be a C400, an R5 Mark II,
Yep.
and an R5.
Yeah.
So I have the ability to basically have a stills dedicated camera,
Yep.
a good hybrid one for trips if I need both,
Yep.
and a dedicated cinema camera.
Yeah.
You know?
Sounds great.
Yeah. And then like I can build up or break down the R5 to however I need.
Yeah.
If I'm on set for
Yeah,
video.
yeah, totally.
And I could build it out as a pseudo cinema camera as a B cam.
Yep.
Or I can just pare it down and use video on a stripped down version on a road trip
Yep.
and still get great video out of it.
Definitely.
But then like turn it into essentially an R5, and then it's just a cam and a dual camera photo situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And C-Log 2 changes that.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the one thing in particular that I was, not that I'm like considering going back to Canon, but kind of disappointed to see not be a feature, was a global shutter on the R1, because that was something that I didn't even consider in a stills camera until Sony released the A9 Mark III. And that's become an incredibly appealing thing because of the amount of sync speeds that you have, particularly with flash in studio, because you don't have to worry about shooting at very specific shutter
200.
speeds, which is, it just opens, like, it's features like that you see and you understand how they could apply to your personal work and how they could actually open up creative possibilities. And I think that's maybe the biggest thing, is like I see a lot of these specs and they all feel like upgrades of varying degrees, but none of them feel like a creative awakening. Like, oh, it's a new feature that could actually change your workflow or change the way that you approach a certain scene or a certain project. And I think it would just be cool to see more of that from Canon on their still side. C400, I think we both felt very differently about.
Yeah.
Where they released that, it's like, whoa, this seemed like the perfect combination of all these things that we've been asking for so long. And that's what made this camera release especially surprising on a stills front. It's like, I kind of expected you to carry some of that same energy from that C400 launch and like blow our minds again with the R5 II and the R1. So yeah, it's a mixed bag of feelings, I would say, overall. Definitely, I mean, you as a current Canon user don't feel any need to upgrade, any urgency on that front.
But again, I would totally see it as a great option for someone with the R6 or 5D Mark IV to go up to the R5 II.
Would you consider selling your R5C and R5 and kind of fusing them together in an R5 Mark II?
No, because I'd want two bodies on the photo side.
Okay. Yeah.
I still want that. So selling the R5C for an R5 II potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just don't use the R5C for video.
Yeah.
I just don't.
And you would definitely use the C-Log 2 and the R5 Mark II more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on like quick trips.
Yeah.
If I did want to do like a vlog type situation, absolutely. And if, from what I heard, didn't even hear it from the horse's mouth, just from other people saying that the wobble is better on image stabilization on the R5 II. So like if you are filming yourself out and about at a wide angle, it's going to be better, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that problem was solved in the R5C because there was an IBIS in it.
Right. Yeah. So there's no wobble. There's just natural camera shake.
Dang it.
Yeah. Which I would prefer personally.
But
the IBIS wobble is awful.
R5C felt like that threshold of being too big. It's like,
Oh, because of the fan on the back?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that extra bit on the back just made it feel like, oh, this is just larger than an R5.
Yeah.
That size of a mirrorless camera. It feels like I'm carrying a small cinema camera around.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not that much bigger.
No, I mean, I do get it though, because looking at it, it's a small square footage difference, but it does make the camera a weirder shape that can be harder to pack in conventional camera inserts
Correct.
or packing cubes. So I definitely understand that. I think, yeah, it's so funny. This whole conversation has actually made me more interested in the Sony A9 Mark III more than anything. I'm like, I was talking about the global shutter and all that. I'm like, that actually is such a compelling thing to like have that, and the speed of it too. I think that's the thing that interests me most about the R1 is like, it really is oriented for action.
Yeah.
And I had never really been interested in that up until our recent shoot for your rebrand for Floberg Runs. It's like, man, it's really fun, like really, really fun to photograph action and to do that in a semi-unconventional way. And having a tool that is really oriented towards that, to do that really well is, I don't know, there's something kind of interesting about that, but still doing it in a way that feels different than other industry. We were talked about on, was it the New York City trip last weekend, the Spore Arts, or maybe it was in studio, or I forget when it was, but that weirdly enough has been kind of interesting to look at in combination with photographing you in your environment.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just kind of cool to like reevaluate some of that, and even coming back from vacation kind of recently too, and being much more in the outdoors, in the Adirondacks, in the places that I grew up going to and feel really at home in, and taking film there and photographing those locations in the way that I wanted and those activities in the way that I wanted. I'm like, it'd be so cool to do that on a digital front too, and to do that for client-facing work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's making you want that camera for yourself
A little
as an
bit.
upgrade.
That global shutter, man. I would want to really test that for studio work in particular.
Yeah, especially with you working with strobes more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't need it, but at all. Like
How
literally at
long
all.
is that going to exist? Like, what is going to be the breakthrough in technology that makes us go, oh, I need that new thing?
Well, one of the stronger rumors about the R1, funny enough, was that it was going to have a DGO sensor,
Yeah.
which the C70 has, which is one of very few cameras on the market that has that. And it more or less takes two readings from two different gains and combines them together. So you're getting the best of both worlds, which is why I think when we have shown the documentary that we primarily filmed on the C70, people have said, oh, it looks so filmic. It looks like so cinematic, all that. It's like, it's because of that DGO sensor. And the thought of Canon bringing a DGO sensor to a stills camera was like, whoa, that would be very interesting to use for stills work. Like that'd be really cool. Almost like a tasteful HDR that has like the best part of like soft highlights and information in the shadows kind of thing, but in one exposure, like that could suddenly be really interesting. Because we've talked about like how much we love the stills in the C70.
Yeah.
Like if I could just make my stills work look like that, oh my gosh, absolutely. So I think it's breakthroughs like that. It's not necessarily going to be the improvement of current specs or like integrating more AI into cameras or things like that. I think it'll really be for people who want to feel creatively fulfilled by these cameras, like what out of the box type features can be added into these things.
But back in the day, it was definitely spec driven.
For sure.
Because we were going from 1080 to 4K.
For sure.
Oh, it's 6K now.
Yep.
It does 4K 120.
Yeah, yeah.
All those things drove sales,
Yep.
and they're not experiencing that anymore.
Yep.
And now it's going to, from a consumer front, and what they need to do on the marketing front is if you get a new DGO sensor like that, you now need to give that to the proper people who can show this is how filmic it looks. And that's how you're going to sell.
Absolutely.
Because again, it's just stuff on paper.
Yep.
You might geek out and get excited about that as a possibility, but it's a lot of the same stuff we're talking about here, where it's just like, we'll see.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep.
I have to experience it and actually see proof in the pudding.
Yep. And a huge sentiment that I think a lot of, especially maybe amateur photographers, but also professionals who want a break from what feel like work cameras are looking towards Fuji, are looking towards Ricoh, are looking towards cameras that have the whole
Baked in.
Film simulation right in camera. It's instant gratification. It has LUTs that you can add to the camera so you can see what's happening in real time. It is fun. It is. And it changes the way that you're even looking at a scene too. Even if Canon had that as an option, like you could import your own LUTs into the camera.
Yeah.
It's like would have been so cool to use that for stills or for video to preview that, because seeing that in real time, so much more inspiring than seeing your gray logged footage, or even like with the view assist LUT that's in camera, it doesn't feel quite the same as if you could add, your own literal gamut LUTs or like the phantom LUTs or something that feels really creative and cool. I think those will be the things that really excite people, at least personally. That would get me excited about cameras like this that have like more creative like options inside of them.
Yeah. Was literally just talking to somebody that is a Canon shooter yesterday, and I think it was the same sentiment. It was like, he's like, I bring my digital and my film home, but I'm still just not shooting either. But I think if Canon, I mean, like if he's married to having to use Canon all the time, then something like an X100V, X100VI would probably be, because I agree with that sentiment. It's like, I don't necessarily want to spend the money on shooting the film, or there's other barriers like, oh, then I have to ship it off and I'm sitting on, but to have, if we were to go to an event with family and I want a really good looking image to share with the family from the weekend we just had, I can't shoot film to do that. And if I shot digital, I'd have to process it. I'd have to edit it over the weekend as well. So to have that middle ground is so powerful with that. And it's exactly what you guys talked about in the Ricoh and like new film or vintage digital.
There's absolutely a market for that. It makes sense that it's as popular as it has been for a while. Especially with film costs, like you've said, and just the time constraints that come with it too. But it's interesting to see the landscape change. I feel like a lot of photographers are clued into the fact that all cameras are good. Like most digital cameras that are being made, they're really good.
Great.
So it's almost not enough to be good now. It's like what makes you interesting.
Yeah.
What makes the camera fun to use.
Yeah.
How can you find this sweet spot between professional capability and also some kind of attraction towards it that actually makes you want to pick it up and use the thing? Because that's the only way that you're actually gonna get good as a photographer. Forget all the specs and the papers and the numbers and everything. Like you got to be going out and just getting your reps in and actually photographing things and practicing and practicing and practicing. So
I think I've started to feel that recently, like in why I might want to start making a switch. With just all of my gear, whether that's new within Canon or outside of Canon or in addition to Canon. Doing a short film with the FX3 again with Cyrus. I was like, dang,
camera's so good.
It's insanely good.
And it's old too. And it's still so good.
And that's when you're like, oh, this is insanely valuable. But then just CLAing the M6 as well. We just sent off all the first rolls yesterday, 12 rolls. Cannot wait. I haven't been this excited about photography in a while. Still nowhere near that excited on the digital photography front on a personal level. Still, like I would need an X100V for sure, something like that, or what you just played with in New York with your new, disposable lens, on your little mirrorless camera.
That setup in New York made me want to make a YouTube video about it. Just how fun and cute and portable and like kind of dumb it is, but it's like in a fun way. It's just like it's cool, and having the like I was telling Gene, I was like, I never would have thought to build this little setup with that specific lens and the flash on my R5. It just doesn't feel the same.
Right.
But with the A7C II, I was like, this feels so natural to do something like this.
It feels like a Fujifilm or a Leica.
Yeah, it's so fun and it's cool. But then I can take those components off, throw my professional lenses on there, and it's a workhorse.
Right.
And that's a really cool middle ground to have.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. So, man.
And maybe it's third market things like you have an R5. And then because they make them for all mounts, like that lens company.
Yep.
So maybe it's just more fun lens companies coming out, and I don't know. I guess Canon would never want to endorse a company like that, unfortunately. But that could just be on a creative front for yourself. It could just be vintage lenses.
I mean, you can adapt RF mount to basically anything. So you could use some old M mount lenses from Leica, or you could use, not even Leica proper, just like any Leica M mount lens from Voigtlander or Typhawk or other brands. But TT Artisans too has like some really fun lenses. Like Brax was showing me, he's got like it was $200 on B&H. It's like a 50 mil 1.4 tilt shift. For $200. I'm like, oh, that's just like a fun little thing to mess around with.
That's great.
Yeah.
If I had the option to bake in looks and then just shoot to JPEG, I would totally be doing that regularly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my
And bring it,
gosh.
yes. Just seeing when we were at Say Coffee and Gene taking that photo, it was like, what? It's gorgeous.
gorgeous.
And just straight out of camera, gorgeous.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah. And it kind of removes some of that decision paralysis when you're editing too, where you're not,
you allow it to be imperfect.
you're like, okay, that is what it is,
Yep.
and I don't want to change anything.
Nope.
You're not importing all the photos, looking through a couple different profiles or presets, tweaking the temperature, tweaking all these different,
and now you have hours gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
all for one photo that wasn't super important to begin with,
Right.
but now that it is awesome right out of camera, you're like, oh, well, I'm actually very grateful that I have
Sick.
this.
Yeah.
So why not have it? It's cameras are in a funny place right now. And it feels like all of us have been in a funky place with our perceptions of cameras for a while too. So I don't know. Anything else to say about the R1 and R5 Mark II, our new
Definitely
favorite cameras from Canon?
Definitely have nothing else to say.
I am. Hey, if this is the last thing I'll say. If anyone is at the Olympics right now and using an R1 or seeing
Joe
people
Hale.
using an R1, I wonder if Joe maybe
Probably is.
bought one before. He is there for sure. I wonder if he bought like an R1 before
I wouldn't be surprised.
going. Are they even available? I don't even know if they're available.
maybe
right
not.
now. I don't. Even
I feel like
think
he's
they are.
got connections though.
He does. Oh, it's pre-order. It's not coming until November. Never mind. He might
Oh.
have a pre-production model,
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know like what you're feeling about Canon if you see these things and you're excited about it. Because if you are, that's awesome. We just happen to be in a different place, I think, right now as very historied Canon photographers. But they look cool, and if they look like they're applicable to you, let us know. I'd love to know what type of people are seeing these and excited about them and what you're interested in creating with them. Not trying to dunk on Canon for the sake of doing that, but more so just kind of like level appropriate criticism when it makes sense.
I feel like a lot of brands could get roasted this same way right now because that's just
Yeah.
the way the market is in regards to technology now.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's just kind of bored of
Yeah.
there isn't any innovation, and that's
Yep.
what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
If you like the video, like it. If you enjoyed the show, leave a rating on Spotify or Apple. I think we're recording another episode about cameras in a little bit.
Nice.
So yeah, we're just going to keep the train going, and we will see you in that episode next week. So cheers.
Goodbye. We love you so much.